Hey everybody, I'm Jacob Sheriff, and this is my podcast. I'm joined with some hosts and friends, Tyler McKinney and Josh Needham, and just within a couple episodes of talking about intentional living and planning, we're going a little off script. So we're just having some kind of random conversations, and it was like, hey, let's just bring that here. So we're probably going to start with somewhere around honor and generational unity, but it's going to go in a lot of different places. So stick with us. It's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be very good at the end of it. And we're going to be like, yeah, we planned on that.
It's like, we should do this every time.
Cut the intro. Make it look like we planned this.
Well, we just came out of an episode, I guess at the time this drops a couple weeks ago, where you shared your story of meeting my sister, Hannah, and y'all told your story, and it was all really good and everything. But even in listening to that, because even though I wasn't in the episode, I was behind the cameras, so I got to hear it.
So we get to talk about you knowing you can't defend yourself, though you were in the room.
I guess I could have just ran up and knocked over a camera, but that would have been good. But what I think is kind of in my heart right now is realizing that we have kind of stepped into a new season of life,
right?
Where we're not at the end, but we're not at the beginning anymore either. And we're in this kind of middle zone where we are in that process of sort of taking the baton and getting ready to run, or maybe in some cases having already taken hold of it and are running.
Both hands are on the baton in some senses.
And it just kind of got me thinking of like, what have we learned so far and what can we learn from history, and looking back at the history of our faith and how how this thing and this journey has carried on throughout the years, and what it's like to be in a place where we are starting to own the responsibility of making sure this keeps going.
Right. And
the weight of that, I think, recently has started to settle in with everything going on in our country. And, at the time this drops, who knows what's going on. But just there's a weight and a responsibility there, but also it's a little bit like this feeling of, oh, okay, I'm not in high school anymore.
It's like adulting 3.0.
Yeah.
Like we've gone through the first two versions of adulting.
Right.
Now it's like, hold on, there's more.
Yeah. There's like this weight of, okay, what was instilled in me and what I learned, I have the responsibility to make sure my kids get that. And that's a different place to be mentally than just being a fired up, young person excited about God or whatever. It's like, oh, no, this thing has to endure beyond just our passion in the moment. So what do you guys think about that?
You mean Tyler?
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, no, I mean,
giving you a chance.
I'm kind of coming into that place where I've got a child now, a 5-year-old, who is starting to understand and listen and wants stories about Jesus and and I'm kind of now in this place of reflecting on, okay, what did my parents do that was right? Because I want to do those things. And then what were those things they did wrong? not to hate on the way that I was raised or anything, but I'm sure they weren't perfect. I mean, I've been a parent long enough to know that that's not a thing. So just, examining and kind of learning from the past. And even I recently had a conversation with my granny about a lot of this stuff that we're talking about right now, and honoring, and her telling me about her parents and things that she took from her parents to help raise her children and the priorities of our family. And so there's kind of this legacy that I'm trying to move along in my children, while still, I guess, putting our own, like Caitlin and I, still putting ourselves into it, if that makes sense. Not just like, this is the way it is, but like, here's kind of what we've learned and how we've changed things. So I don't have the oldest child in the room to have this experience. So I'm like, if you're in 3.0, I'm in like 2.6 or something. Like I'm getting into 3.0.
Yeah, we hit a major threshold with our 5th child, knowing we are no longer having children anymore. We are raising children, because we were raising and having, and that was one season. And now with ministry transition to where it was summer 2019
Yeah.
that behind the scenes, my dad officially transitioned to me to lead on a staff and leadership level. And then towards the end of 2019, him making this statement to our church, hey, Jacob is stepping into a more vision-oriented role, a higher-level leadership role, and that was bringing to surface what is happening beneath the surface. And then 2.5 months later, he has a heart attack and goes off scene for a while. And we knew within a few days of that he was going to make it. It was just now a matter of how soon.
Yeah.
And so it's like this baton that was just kind of starting gets passed, and then he gets well and kind of is re-engaging. And so we had a kind of a clunky 2020 where there's a mutual honor. Honor is a core value of our church, part of our leadership covenant. So there was never dishonor, but sometimes in an effort to honor, we're not communicating clearly. And so towards the end of 2020, we really, behind the scenes, we're really working on a lot of these things kind of practically, and hit a great spot at the end of 2020 and going into 2021, where we're really clear and clear about both hands being on the baton, what that means and what it doesn't mean. But it took a long time to get that practically. We couldn't get there if we didn't work on it spiritually and kind of relationally first. But it speaks to even what I'd said a couple episodes ago about I hit a dissatisfaction point in like being a part of a great church, but yet why do I still feel like there's some superficial things? And one of the things that piqued that for me is the lack of an eternal perspective and a lack of a historical perspective in our church. Not because people didn't think about those things, but there was something that wasn't in just the cultural mindset about how long our history is and how forward our futuristic hope is. It was very much like now, like what's happening now, and how do we live now? And in our particular stream of the faith, which is kind of evangelical, charismatic, non-denominational, that has history only like late 70s. And so in my mid-20s, trying to navigate this, like, wait, hang on, like, is our faith only a few decades old? No, this is historical faith. And I stumbled onto Jude, the letter of Jude, and it's like verse 4 or 5, where it says, I wanted to write to you concerning our common salvation, but instead I must write to you concerning our faith once for all handed down to the saints. Getting this sense where, once the apostles recognized Jesus may not come back, in their lifetime, they're in the last days, but knowing that it's okay that these days are a little delayed. Even Peter talking about, hey, God is patient. Don't consider his patience a laziness or like he's not paying attention. It's going to happen. He's just patient. Well, he had no clue in his natural mind that we're going to be 2,000 years into this, and we're thinking like we're in this generation going, well, it might be it, and we think it could be. Yeah. It kind of looks like it. However, it could not be. We need to plan forward for another 1,000 years, and that's where I started to understanding. Okay, what's our historical context? What did the faith? There's a definite article there. The faith, once for all, handed down to the saints. That's when I started understanding things like the creeds and how our faith isn't just on a trend of a movement. Right. These movements that often are rejuvenating for the church. They're important course corrections often. But these movements are couched within a larger context. And if I can start seeing that very far-reaching context, now I can put this particular transition or change in season in that context and recognize, okay, it's important, it's pretty critical, and we need to do our part, but we are one part of a very large whole. Yeah. And it makes me see even some transition between my parents' generation, our parents' generation, and our generation, seeing the faith passed down, and now with my children. So teaching my kids the Apostles' Creed, knowing that these things anchor our specific faith with the faith that's passed down. It's now our responsibility not just to receive, but receive and to pass. Yeah. And so seeing individual moments like now, we have to get a wider perspective, that it's not just about my personal preference, or in like our church's context, my favorite weekend communicator, or I really like I still it's kind of funny. It's a little disappointing sometimes, but it's still pretty funny. Like, man, I'm just so glad your dad's back. Thanks. But I understand. I get it. People like my dad, and he's a great teacher. So how do I help, like, show value to that?
Yeah.
But also recognize, like, hey, he is running his race, and it ain't going to be forever.
Yeah.
And it's got to pass on to the next leg of the race, and that ain't going to be forever either. So I've been really trying to think through multi-generational things
I
like
love
that in
that.
this setting.
I just imagine Timothy, like, dude, you're really good and all, but man, I'm so glad that Paul's back.
So just the number of times it was so funny.
You heard Paul getting out of prison anytime soon?
See, how's he doing, by the way?
Yeah. That's often what it feels like. Had a number of weeks ago, a very, very sweet lady. We were having lunch after church one day, which is we do often. That's kind of where my dad and I just kind of debrief service, and then just kind of I check in a little bit on where he's at, and he checks in on where I'm at, and kind of seeing what's next. And sometimes it's more personal than ministry. But anyway, we're sitting there, and I'm sitting right across the table. So this lady comes up from behind him, so she's able to see Hannah and I. Goes up to my parents. She goes, "Hey, I sit up in the balcony, and I'm not gonna lie, I look at the front row to see who's speaking, and I was so glad you were here
Oh
today."
my gosh.
And I was right there. And I'm like, you know what? I might have taken this personal a few years ago or 5 years ago, or maybe even a few months ago. I'm not going to take that personal. I get it. I'm glad he's here too. But anyway, try it now. I recognizing, like, I'm called to lead these people who might not like enjoy my dad's preaching more than mine. Like, how to get that perspective to see, like, hey, we're one leg in a very giant race that could go a lot longer.
Yeah.
And it's important for us to not fumble this. And so that's part of even my dad and I's conversation is, hey, it's okay that both of our hands are on this this baton. That is a very short period of time when you think in all of history or eternity. So let's just make sure we're doing this well and doing this right.
Yep. With a few things came to mind while you were talking through that, like the different perspectives that we have as we're growing up. Like when we're young, whatever the newest, shiniest thing is like, that's the only thing that grabs our attention. Then we get a little older and it's like, okay, well, what is everybody else into? And it's like this trendy kind of like, you have to find how to express yourself based on what other people think are cool. And it's not about what you like. And so it's this weird, awkward teenagery time. And then like you get past that a little bit and you're just like, why am I being held back by all these old people who don't know how the world works? And I'm just going to get out there and make things happen. And then it's this like journey of maturing, right? And so your perspective slowly starts to broaden. Like the more life you experience, the more time that you actually experience, you start to realize, I don't want trends anymore. Like I'm kind of done with the fads and the fashion up and down or whatever is cool at the time. Like I want something that I can build a life on. And then we realize, wow, there's wisdom in the life and the experience that the generation that came before me has. And we start to value that. And all of a sudden we start to realize, wow, there's so much here that we can learn, but not just learn and then like kind of fit into our schedule. We realize that we're all part of this giant tapestry,
right.
and this giant story of humankind. That was a weird accent twist there. Humankind. This long story that goes that has this rich history and all of it. To me, that's the comforting part. Is I don't have to make all this up, and I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm one part of a much larger story, and I have to do my part to keep that story moving forward.
Yeah.
And there's some comfort that comes with that, but there's also a responsibility and an ownership. And the idea that you and me and you are all connected by the same faith to the same Savior who lived and walked on this earth thousands of years ago. And like when you really pause to think about that, sometimes it's just like, you know, and the impact that one person's life made. Obviously, that one person was God. So it's, keep things in perspective here. But the ripple effects throughout eternity of the number of lives that one person's decisions affected, and that blown up to a major scale. And then whenever you think about the part we play in that, and the choices that we make, and the impressions we leave on our kids, and what those choices that they make are going to leave on their kids.
Yeah.
It's just kind of this mind-blowing process whenever you sit down and actually think about it.
Well, I think we in the faith, in the Christian faith, have to become safeguards of what you're talking about, because I'm not seeing it culturally. And I've been really thinking through some of this, had some random conversations, even had a conversation with my dad about it a couple times. He's like, hey, we need to talk about that. Like, we need to get that in front of people. I'm like, I don't know. But I think I had this conversation with you guys off camera one time about like multi-generational thinking, about first, second, third generation. And, we are in a second generation type setting where, my dad was a Abraham in his generation, in his life, that a lot of people in my dad's generation were Abrahams, where they had to leave. Either they left legalism, or they left like total pagan heathen lifestyle. That's kind of almost always the two I have. I don't. There's a third out there that I've had occasionally. It's just not as prominent. But they leave. They have to start over because the general environment they were in with their family, with their dead church or whatever, was moving in the wrong direction. So they had to move in a different direction. And then my generation is a little bit more like an Isaac generation, where we sit with the Abraham. So in my case, my dad is very anti-legalism. Like just legalism is a hijack for him. And it's because that's the Ur of the Chaldees for him that he left. So he ain't going back there, and no one he influences is going to go back there. So that's like a real big deal for him. I don't know a lot of legalism. I didn't grow up with legalism. I was very young when my dad left his original home before I was born, before he was married. So I don't know the pain of legalism. I only secondhand observe it. But I have been taught by the Abraham. So now I'm thinking, how do I ensure my third generation, my children, experience his wisdom and understanding and what he resisted, but then what I've built on, they take the good, but also remember the bad that I don't have firsthand experience of. I got some other firsthand experience, but I don't have that experience of what they left.
Right.
And if you look at Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, it took that third, fourth generation for the faith that Abraham pioneered to become integrated into just their assumptions. That just is, Yahweh is who Yahweh is. Like, he's God. So deal with it. Like, that's who we serve, and that's what it's going to be. It took that to the third and fourth generation, to where Isaac was just almost like just kind of passing it down quickly. There's not much said about Isaac. So recognizing we stand in this second generation, but what I've noticed, a couple things I've noticed, is how few third generations I've encountered. Almost everyone I've encountered is first or second generation of something. They've left something and had to start over. And then as a young adult, it's still somewhat pretty trendy for young adults who feel a calling to ministry to go plant their own church, go do their own thing, go become a senior pastor in their like early 20s or whatever. And I wrestled with that. I was in my mid 20s and thinking, like, I love my church. I just don't think my church will allow me to be me. So I probably should just go somewhere else. And the Lord specifically, I only have like 3, maybe 4 times where I know that the Lord was speaking to me. Even if it wasn't like this one moment audible voice, but just a whole season. That was one of them where I was being a bit selfish. And the Lord basically said, unless you can give your life for another man's vision, what makes you think anyone would give their life for a vision I give you? And that's when I'm like, all right, I don't know if I like it or not, but obviously I need to stay and I need to sell out to this. And so the value of putting another 10 years into serving my dad and his vision and the vision God's given our church, now made me capable of carrying that vision forward. Whereas if I'd have started over, been a separate Abraham, now I'm starting over. And who knows if my children, and it's like I noticed a lot, even some of my peers, launching their own thing. And many of them, that's exactly what they needed to do. They needed to plant their own thing. They need to kind of launch in their own direction. And our generation, kind of that upper millennial, is a very entrepreneurial generation. And so many times that's totally God. And many times it's just a trend that they're just not content to play second fiddle or sit in the second chair or shit, third, fourth, fifth chair, thinking that because I'm gifted or because I'm intelligent or I have some experience, now I'm worthy of this position. And we've lost something in our perspective of that multi-generational thinking where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob can sit at the same table and learn from each other. We've lost, there's something about that that's been lost. And how few people I hear saying, oh yeah, my grandparents left, this or that and started over, and my parents passed it on to me, and now I get to experience the benefit of that. I can't even tell, I don't even know of a single prominent or stable and influential church that's on its third generation. I, off the top of my head, I'm sure they exist and I'm sure they're out there. I cannot think of them. Many of the kind of early charismatic word and faith church planters, those pioneer boomers that were just going to plow new ground, those Abrahams, there's a lot of those churches that just aren't around anymore, or they've kind of fizzled into kind of just a real small influential church. I just am not aware of a lot of third generation. And I look at that as a second generation and say, okay, if everybody leaves and starts their own thing, who's there to keep and to build onto what already is?
Yeah.
And I made that commitment about a decade ago. And after a decade of serving and sacrificing, now I get to be a part of that passed down, but get to do it alongside my dad, not having started over or him dying, worse yet, him just dying and I'm just in it by myself. And seeing that, how rare that is, I want to lead well and be something for my children that I don't have an example of. I don't have someone I can look at that is a third generation and learn how to teach my kids how to be that. At most, I have second generation peers, and I want to see that changed, to get a better mindset of that. And it's even worse in culture, very much just divisional. And I noticed, well, I can hold that for, I've been monologuing for a while. So there's another passion point I have about multi-generational thinking. But anyway, that's just something that's been very stirring deeply in my heart because I just don't see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like, when I think and I'm spending time thinking of, like, what do I envision for my family and for my children, and for, like, there is real value in being able to dream about the future and possibilities and things like that. But there's also a value in knowing what to value and instilling that in them, and not just, you've heard the story before of, like, I forget, all of the details of it, and there's probably multiple versions of it, but, like, the meatloaf that always gets the ends cut off, and then that gets handed down a few generations, and then, like, the person that 3 or 4 generations down is like, why do we cut the ends off of this? And then they go and they ask everybody who, and then it cuts back to the first, and it's like, oh, it's because I didn't have a pan that was big enough or whatever.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be guilty of just handing stuff off without any meaning. Like, but going through the process of mining out what those true valuable things are, and identifying those, and really seeing the value of them, and valuing them at the level that the prior generation did, so that we can give those things on to our kids, I think is just so important, because we've been given an opportunity as the second generation, as the Isaac generation, to not be bogged down and hindered by a lot of the baggage of the first generation. We didn't have to pioneer the trail. We've had time to have open land to build and try.
Yeah.
And there in that process, there's opportunities to discover new gold and new things that are important. And then when we, as that second generation, value what was given to us, but also hand off these new things that we value, like that, the potential of what the third generation can do is just really encouraging to think about. And whenever, you always, I say you, but we all, I think, always have these questions of like, what am I leaving behind?
Yeah.
And it's a sort of an existential question that we ask if we're
old enough to ask the question now.
Yeah. And
those who are our elders are like, you ain't old enough to ask that question.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. I have enough years behind me that says, oh no, what am I leaving behind?
Yeah. Yeah. But when we ask those questions, it's like when I was younger, the things that I valued were notoriety and fame and like wanting to be thought highly of as whatever, whatever my ambition was at that time. And now it's like the things that I value are, I want to raise a family that loves God and has a peaceful home. And I want to grow older and have relationships with my kids and like have like the things that I didn't realize were so precious and special. Right. I'm starting to realize now.
Yeah.
Because I had the benefit of that growing up, and I'm like, oh, that's really important and that's really special. How do I make sure to guard that for my kids?
Yeah. I think too, a lot of this goes back to honoring. So, I mean, that's kind of where we started with all of this. But I think a big part of that, of when we're passing things down, is not just saying thank you for the things that the previous generation did, but acknowledging those things even with them. So for our staff huddles on Thursdays, Austin, our campus pastor, has labeled them as Thankful Thursdays. And
hashtag.
Yes, they're the most emotional Thursdays, period, because we select a person and we honor them. We tell them the things that we're grateful for about them, or the things that they've passed down to us that we can take and that we use in our lives and things like that. And kind of the concept was, we don't want to wait for people to die to honor them, or leave or whatever. And so, we've kind of gone through some of the older ones first, and it's just been this emotional, terrible thing. Everybody's crying. Everybody's like, but it makes you think about, okay, not just like, it's very typical.
Is it at 8:00 on Thursdays?
Yeah. So we're also compromised from sleep.
I'm tired because you just got the third Wednesday night service.
Yes.
So, man, perfect storm.
Oh, I know.
love it.
And so we do this, and you're just experiencing this sense of, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but basically where we're not just saying thank you for what you did, but we're acknowledging what you did. Right. Like I'm reflecting on what you've done.
It's not enough to just to be thankful for the thing you did. It's like, I'm thankful for you.
Right.
And I have value for you.
Right.
And you're expressing that, like looking them in the eyes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's
It's amazing how little we do that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's why everybody cries, because nobody's used to it. And he says, guys, it's Thursday. And everybody's like, oh,
Get
no,
the tissues.
Here we go. We're all tired after that.
Right. We're drained.
You need a lunch break at 8:30.
It's good, though. It really is.
Absolutely.
It kind of keeps your perspective on some things. So,
yeah.
But, and I can keep that going, because for us, I know specifically with Victory Life, with our church, we have a 30, how long is our history?
By the time this episode is released, it'll be 34 years.
So we have a 34-year history, but a lot of times that's all we look back to. And so I think we could even hit on that a little bit. It might be a little more closer to home, but just that concept of, we're not just looking back. You had brought it up a little bit earlier. We're not just looking back to the start of wherever you attend church, but we're looking back to the beginning, the church fathers and those things. So do you want to address any of those things? I know you kind of did already, but.
Well, I'm passionate about it, and it's hard to devote enough time to really learn and glean. C.S. Lewis talked about the value of old books. He's like, if a book's still around and the author is dead, then it's generally a tried and true thought that is worth at least pondering, because anything that's new could also be not real. It could also not be impact. And this was like 60s, I think he was writing this. So he always recommended, you read a new book, next book needs to be an old book. And so I started like okay, I'm not going to read what everybody around me is reading about whatever the newest book was and whoever it was. I'm going to find like old books. And so reading C.S. Lewis, and then I'm like, that's like 100 years ago. Yeah. And so then I just bought St. Augustine's City of God, which is about this thick, that was written at the fall of the Roman Empire. Like somehow I'm going to plow through it. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but just that recognizing we have wisdom. I think that's one of the things that has been very valuable to me is recognize tried and true wisdom of the ancients versus whatever's trendy pop cultural knowledge. And I don't even just mean that like pop culture, like what's in the culture. I just mean even like in the Christian faith, whatever's new thinking. Usually if something's new, chances are it's either heresy or just untried truth. Like if I'm speaking something completely and 100% original, I'm probably closer to heresy than I am to truth. There might be new ways of communicating old truths, but that's where the creeds came in, is like, this is what the truth of Christianity is. And so having value for that, I don't see that being very common. And there's honestly a gravitational pull towards more liturgical churches that have these kind of ancient practices. That they're at least being more stable. They're not necessarily becoming more influential or having like these massive gatherings, but they're being more people are getting committed to those, because there's something about we're missing something when we're only enamored by the immediate. And I believe this is one of the things I think I'm supposed to do for my generation, is teach us how to be human again. We're losing something of our humanity when we're always looking to the new thing, the next thing, the new thing. And that's just, it's irritating. But I also want to be merciful to people. It's because they're not finding the true depth of well thought through wisdom and life. And that's where I want to be a witness of that, by absorbing the wisdom of the ages and listening to voices that have, a couple hundred years died, but their influence is still present. And that kind of wisdom that guides our life, that isn't controlled by the latest technological trend, is just been a real passion of mine. That's why I get journals and stuff that I just don't like the amount of time I use for technology. And just even, I think technology has made us bite into a lie that our elders are dumb. And this is some of the conversation I had with my dad on, like, we've talked various times in our relationship about generational gaps. And there's a sense where there's no such thing. Like, humanity's humanity. There's human struggles that are common to every generation. And I said, but I would disagree, but only in this generation because of this. In every previous generation, even up to my parents' like teenage, like somewhere in there after that is where this would change. You needed the wisdom of your fathers and mothers and grandparents to make it in your life. So you have to learn a trade. Well, you got to go to the experts, and they know how to teach you that trade. You're like, in a sense, there was more discipleship then. You require the wisdom of your elders to live, to make it, to grow. And what technology did to us is it made the younger have a perception of being more educated
than the elder,
because who's teaching who?
Right.
I mean, I had to plug in all of our technology and our TVs and VCRs as a kid, and our Direct TV, and then I'm the one teaching my parents their phone, and then I'm finding out there's stuff that kids are teaching me. And you know, our kids are 4 years old and able to navigate a phone and tablet and all that kind of stuff. And so there's this perception that because I know how to do something you don't, I therefore am smarter than you.
I think in the book I'm currently reading, Eugene Peterson calls that the difference between information and knowledge, and how knowledge has become information because it's a phone, and knowledge is valued, but information can just be looked up. And so we no longer have this craving or desire for knowledge. We just have information. It's in my hand. It's in my pocket. I can figure out what I need to do.
And I will, this was only by the grace of God, because there's nothing that I could have done to even know that I needed it. but I'm so grateful for Morris Means in my life, where I'm a 20-year-old youth pastor. I think I'm within my first month, maybe 2 months of being a youth pastor, and having this sense like I feel called, like, but I'm just kind of doing this because I was asked to, but there's something in me that's like I want to have impact, and anyway, navigating all that. And at that time I was 20, and Morris just shuffled into the youth room on a Wednesday night, and I use that word very specifically because that's exactly what he did. Shuffle, smelling like mothballs, shuffles in. I think he's lost, and he comes up to me and he says, "Are you Jacob Sheriff?" And I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. I'm like, yeah. I thought I was going to have to like lead him to the sanctuary, the adult sanctuary. And he said, I'm Morris Means. God told me to come pray for you. And the next 4 years, minimal, 3 Wednesdays out of the month, and then many months there was a lot more interaction he and I had, where this 80-year-old is teaching me how to pray.
Yep.
And in my early 20s, I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know if I need this, but you know what? I'll be respectful. I was taught to honor my elders. And then over that 4 years, actually having a friendship for this old man, who in the natural, there's no reason for us to have any interaction. And I never would have gone up to him at 20 and said, I need someone like you to pray for me. Mm-hmm. But somehow he knew who I was and heard God enough. I don't even know how. He never told me like what was the prompt that led him to that. But just came to love me, to guide me. He never said anything negative. Just loved me and prayed for me and taught me how to pray. And I got a picture in my early 20s of what being a wise and godly elder looks like, because up to that point in my life, everyone old I had seen did not act like that. They just acted selfish. And that was my own misperception. I'm sure some of that was true, but there was plenty of exceptions. I just, at 20, didn't care. For whatever reason, I was just stupid.
You were 20.
I was 20.
The answer's right there, dude.
But he comes into my life and gives me this vision of being in my 80s, being passionate about the Lord, being a man of prayer and influence, and what his presence felt like. That if you just look at him in the natural, he's an elderly, frail man who smells like mothballs.
Unimpressive.
Yeah, very unimpressive. In a really old cardigan.
Yeah. Or maybe a corduroy suit jacket or something.
Yeah, it was wonderful. But you get in his presence and just recognize there's something of Jesus right when I'm here. And I remember there was one youth night I had him preach, and it was the most confusing, and like he went off on all these different random tangents, and so many times just, you guys just look so beautiful. You're just so beautiful. And just like, and as a message, it was mostly incoherent and maybe had a few good ideas or points. Yeah. But I'm seeing these like 40, 50, 60 teenagers just like enthralled, like stuck on him.
I was in the second row.
It's possible
It's
possible some of them were just not being rude. They weren't necessarily being respectful. They just weren't being rude. But there was plenty that was just like stuck. And like, again, if I'm looking at like a score chart of what makes an effective sermon, it scores 0 or 1 out of 5 on all of them.
Right. And it wouldn't be in Andy Stanley's list of how to preach.
No. But at the end of that, I just said, Morris, I would love for you to just pray for whoever wants prayer. And there wasn't any like music. There wasn't any light changes. It was back in the days of just these stale warehouse lights, and there was nothing of the natural that was of any impact. And yet he's like 83 at the time. It was the last time he was at youth, I think. It might have been a little before that, but it wasn't much longer before he passed.
Yeah.
And he'd take his hands and pray for every person just like this, put them on their ears. And like, again, he smells funny. His breath smells. And yet watching the power of God on every single person he prayed for. There, at that time, there was this kid, I don't even know if it was his first time, but he basically was in a gang, and so he got drugged to church that day. I saw that kid break. Just you could see the hardness just coming off of him. And it's just this old man who was mostly incoherent, but like the presence of God on him that like at I was like 23, 24, I'm like, I want that. And so after the last person, he even like had to sit down because he was tired. And yet every single person just Like for a few people, I guarantee you that's some defining moment in their lives. And yet there was nothing in the natural that led to that, to where like I grabbed his hands when he was done. I said, you can put your hands on me and you're going to give me that anointing. Like I want what you have. And it gave me this picture of like, that's what 60 years at that time, he was converted at like 40. So he had this is what 40 years of intimacy with God would lead to. I want that. It changed how I perceived time, changed how I perceived influence. It changed me, and I would not have asked for that. And so again, that's just the grace of God. But it's like this image in my head is driving me now, that I'm still 45 years, 50 years from that moment. But I'm excited. Like, Morris, I'm gonna beat you. You only had 40 years. I will have 60 years of that. That's what now I don't want to lose in our church, is giving people who are elders, not like formal set in elders, but people that are not elderly or just even old, but just that sense where just because you don't know how to handle your phone does not mean there isn't wisdom that kids need, and don't get selfish about it. And I'm so eternally grateful for Morris. He's one of the primary influencers in my life, and he did almost nothing in the natural for me.
Right.
And that was 10 years ago. So, I mean, it left a huge impact on you.
He died 12 years ago.
Oh, so I guess it was.
So this is 16 years ago.
So this is this month,
dude. The month we're recording this month, 16 years ago.
Okay. So it was a lot longer than I'm realizing.
16. So you were.
I was in high school. That's right.
You were young.
I was a kiddo.
You were a kiddo.
Yeah, no, I remember. I was second row. I remember just thinking, there was one story he told that made sense in that sermon. One story. And it was about him praying, meeting in, I don't remember. He was meeting.
Hereford.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Hereford.
He's praying.
Yeah.
And anyways, I just remember how important it seemed to him, like that we understood what he was talking about, even though none of us could. And I was also sitting next to the guy who was in a gang. And I mean, we're not just talking like, we're talking like this guy was in a gang.
Like,
he was.
It's possible he's knifed someone
In a bad place, very bad place. And he dropped. I mean, he was changed from that day forward, and ended up in ministry for a while. I mean, he was just, dude, and he's an awesome guy. It changed his whole life.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. There's such a beautiful picture of what a life lived in submission and intimacy with Jesus can do. And it just like you were saying, it's not in the natural, and it wasn't the flashy, the trendy, the cool. It was something tangible and authentic. And I think the older we get, the more we realize how much value that has, because big names come and go, trends come and go. We're gonna look back at what we're wearing 10 years from now and probably think, what were we thinking? Or we're gonna look back,
and be like, oh, we had hair.
I
rebuke you in Jesus' name.
I still had some dark hair in my beard, but anyway, we're gonna look back, and all of the things that are superficial just aren't gonna matter. But there's something deeper, and whenever you get to like have a conversation with somebody who's lived life and who's seasoned, I'll use the word seasoned.
It's very tasteful of you.
There's a difference. There's a difference between being old and being mature.
Yeah.
Right. And what we are all after in seeing people transformed by Jesus is to see that maturity grow. Yeah. To see people grow in maturity. But like when you get to have those conversations with people who have gone through not just challenges in life, but who have overcome those challenges and who have not got hung up on little offenses and had their growth stunted by just the petty stuff of life, but they've moved beyond, and maybe even in the natural, they're not necessarily the most successful person, but when you get to talk to them and they get to like uncover a little bit of what's behind the curtain in their relationship with Jesus, and you see the intimacy there, and you see the true shaping that's been taking place in their life. It's just such an inspiring thing. Mm-hmm. And I think we, as this generation, we have to seek that out in people who are more seasoned than us. We have to call it out, and we have to value it. Yeah. And then we have to be on that journey continually, so that when our kids get to be our age, we have gold to share. Yeah. From a life lived. Yeah. In that way.
A couple episodes ago, talking about intentional living, I set out like vision, intention, means, where you've got something that propels you from behind, but then there's something that compels you forward. And that's partly vision. Where are you going, and who are you becoming? And the gift I was given is Morris. That my dad couldn't even have given me that, because he wasn't, in my perception at that time, he wasn't old enough to be that at that level. Yeah. But Morris was that gift. And it's like, when I think about where I want to be and who I want to be, he's an image that I have of like, that man knew Jesus in a way that I want to know Jesus. And that keeps me crafting my prayer life in a way that isn't just monotonous or legalistic, but moving me forward, because I see that, and what could it be if I've got 30 more years, 40 more years of intimacy with Jesus? I can't microwave that now. Mm-hmm. And that was a big deal for me 5.5 years ago, was I can't make any of these changes that I want to make overnight. But 5 years is going to pass. 10 years is going to pass. How will it pass intentionally? How will I move my life in a direction that 5 years will pass, and I'll look back and say, I'm so glad I started that then. Mm-hmm. So things like praying the Psalms, that's when I started that. And I'm like, this is going to be super hard and confusing, but eventually I'm going to appreciate it. Yeah. I'm 5.5 years into that, and I'm like, I just feel like I'm getting started. And I noticed the transformation I've experienced. And it's like, well, what if I can do that for another decade? Mm-hmm. What if I can do that for another 3 decades? And then how can I be that vision for somebody else to have, to then want to follow in that? And what can we do if that continues on generationally, that isn't just about, oh man, are we going to survive this latest political change? And oh my gosh, where's our country going? And oh my gosh, there's stuff all over the world going. It's like, yeah, it's really bad. But chances are, it's not going to get solved in the next presidency, no matter who wins. It might get worse, but it might get a little better. We're talking about problems that have existed, that have gone downhill generations. We at least have to consider that there's a possibility that it's going to take generations to change it. Mm-hmm. So how are we pointing in that direction? And we won't be able to do that just on our own, thinking about our own generation, our own ambitions, our own ministry, our own careers only. You got to think about those things, but think about it in a way that says the wake I leave needs to be one that brings people along with me, not pushes people away.
Right.
We have to play the long game, because that's the game that God is playing. Like we can't be in this for like the short-term gains. Mm-hmm. I mean, we can, you can hop on whatever trend, and we can do Jacob reacts to fail videos or whatever, and get the algorithm spinning, but playing that game will only get us so far. Like that's not what we're after. We're not after whatever the world's definition of success is as defined at this date and time. We have to have a vision for life and for our church and for our families that is eternal. And that's what excites me, I think, even in the midst of how crazy everything is right now and how dark things may seem, is we happen to know the source of hope, and it's real, and it's tangible, and it's something that we can hold on to and have trust in, that is going to last longer than whatever distracting circumstance or situation or thing might come against us, if we learn to stay tethered to that and bring our kids along for that, and they bring their kids along for that. Like, however far into the future we can imagine, I want to be remembered as somebody who lived in a deep way, and who showed my kids how to live deeply from that deep well. So yeah, this is a heavy topic, but
this is a good one.
It's good.
This is what happens when we're spontaneous.
Yeah.
We just get super serious, which hopefully now this is what we're 6 episodes in.
Yeah.
You just should probably expect it.
It's very good.
Maybe we'll bring in some fun elements in future seasons. I don't know. Maybe we'll just have
So
to see.
season 1 is not
Yeah,
going to be
season
fun,
one.
just so you have
Season
your
one's been
expectations
fun.
set.
I think it's been fun. It's just
Sorry,
not been
fun.
silly.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I enjoy these conversations very much.
It's always been what you're saying. It's always been my criticism of kind of modern technological marketing culture that our generation kind of just has a bad taste in our mouth. None of us have figured out how to fix it, but we have like this inbred this cynicism towards I'm being marketed to, which
Right.
means
Yeah.
they are trying to play on me.
Yeah. You're selling me something. Yep.
So I just the shallow following, the trends, all that stuff. I got a bad taste in my mouth for it, which has made me not very active on social media and various places like that. That I know I need to improve on, but what's inside of me is that like just dissatisfaction with that short term, because there were tons of people who followed Jesus very briefly. And there were tons of people who's like, yeah, I'll follow you. Oh, wait, I need to go take care of this other thing. And Jesus like, just go. Like unless you're willing to give it all, then like you really you don't have anything to do. So you need to either be all in or all out. I'm like, man, I'm so all in on Jesus that every time I figure out that I'm doing something in the short term that's not helpful, man, I repent quickly and I get that fixed. But we want to see not fans of Jesus, not I guess fans or like followers in that way. Being follower of Jesus is not just having decent feelings about his influential sayings, but actually discipleship comes down to a whole life commitment to him, recognizing this is our whole life.
Yeah.
And it is our whole life to then pass down. That's why we had kids. We all didn't have kids just because we just felt like having kids. In the natural, there's not a lot of reason to have kids. It's not that great. I mean, you get a few tax breaks, but who knows the next tax cycle will be. In the natural, they're costly, and the world apparently is ending to all, some people on the Christian side and some people on the environment side. It's like, it's all going, you shouldn't have any kids. We need to curb the population growth. And yet we had kids. Why? Because like we're seeing this as we're going to make generational change.
Yeah.
And the best way to make a disciple is to raise them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want the world to have the gift of wisdom and generations of insight and truth that has been handed down to me. And so to selfishly hoard that and hold on to that, it just seems like a crime. And it's not just about like raising kids to raise kids, but it's like there's something just beautiful about continuing that story on and continuing the joy that I've experienced in life. I mean, yes, life has its struggles and its hard times, but there's so much richness and joy to experience as well. And to bring that light into the world is just awesome.
Yeah.
So we're philosophical today. I feel like we need something candles or
Coffee.
or, yeah, like a
we
little
don't have
coffee.
There was a year ago around this time, one of our senior elders passed away. He was our oldest member as a senior elder. He was like a grandpa to me. He was very influential in my life, and wasn't very boisterous, he never got up on stages. Most people didn't even know who he was, and yet this is a senior elder of our church. And I got a chance to speak at his funeral. And one of the things I had said, that because this man was not necessarily what you would call an influencer, and yet he influenced so many people, but just in such small and subtle ways, you wouldn't see the magnitude until now he's passed and everybody is in the same place. And I just started thinking, there's some level of impact that you do not reach until you've been in the same place with the same group of people for 20 or 30 years. They'd been here since the beginning. He'd been with my dad even before the church began. When my dad came to this church in 87, he came with him. So he'd been around since 83, 84. So we're talking, it was like 36, 37 years of being in our church and being my whole life. And just that recognition that man, 30 plus years invested in the same place with the same group of people, there is a certain level of impact and influence that if you short circuit that 5 years in, you're just not going to get to. And it's not condescending to anybody that kind of has to make changes in their life. But what if there were more people like that could stick through the hard things? Because you're in the same place with the same group of people for 30 years. Either that is a very blind group of people that is very close-minded in their thinking, or you've been able to navigate challenges. You've been able to work through disagreements. You've been able to get annoyed at each other and work through it. And that love being deeply nurtured that you just can't have in just a short period of time. And it's like, well, I think of that and like, well, I already have, 30 years as part of this church, 30 plus years as part of this church. What could happen for another 30 years where I'm 60 years in the same place with the same group of people? And I raise children who are 40 years in that same place, who are raising kids that are 20 years in that same place. Like what kind of impact could that be? And I don't really know. I just know it's better than we get mad and we move on. We get offended and we move on. We get hurt and we hold that in and we move on. We don't live face to face. We just short circuit everything, or we just find the next more trendy thing. The new church that came into town, or it's just within driving distance, but it's got that really well known pastor. That stuff just. I've lost my taste for that.
Or it's not even that. It's I don't go to a church and I'm going to unfollow this account that I disagree with a single post that they put. I mean, this is harsh, but it's more shallow than what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's very sad. Terry calls those people, Pastor Terry, Dr. Terry Brown, calls those people pillars. Like those are pillars in the local church. So those guys who are here 30, 40, 50 years, who are leaving that impact, they're holding this together. And man, I love that term.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot to be thankful for.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The legacy that has been handed off and will be continually handed off, but just the amount of blood, sweat, and tears, finances, all of the things that have been put into this church. We get to be the gardeners of that now and the guardians of that. And that's just such an incredible honor, because that, whenever we, eventually hand this off to the next generation, we want to, in that moment, have trust that what we have valued so much, they're going to value. So by sowing that honor and that value now, we can expect to reap that.
I had that. It wasn't an epiphany, because I've been nurturing these ideas about like what cannot get lost in transition. So years ago, even just when this was even just a thought, what cannot get lost? And so things like our leadership covenant of honor, unity, and trust, we knew like that could not get lost. We can't lose that. I was in a meeting with my dad and we were inquiring about like his personality, and anyway, there was a facilitator who's doing a really great job, and I just recognized something about my dad, how that I had. Well, my dad's impulsive, and working for him, you have to be able to react to that impulsive nature and just make it happen. And so there's a lot of how I recognized I'm formed by a response to my dad. So in a lot of sense, we're opposites. Maybe we were supposed to be opposites, but a lot of it is because I'm responding to him. So I'm more strategic in planning because my dad is impulsive. And sometimes I held that against him. But as we were in this conversation, it came out, he's like, listen, I can't plan it beforehand. I listen for the Lord, I hear a word, and then I act. I don't make a plan and ask God to bless it. I obey the Lord whenever he speaks, and I can't change that. And I was thinking like, okay, that's it. I can't lose that. That just because now my personality is a little more strategic, a little more plan oriented in preparation and do things in rhythm and cadence, which I think is healthier. I can't lose that quick obedience to the word of the Lord, that constant listening and attention to the Holy Spirit. And when the Lord speaks, it doesn't matter what our plan is. It doesn't matter what our preparation has done. It doesn't matter what we were doing. Now we're doing that. And knowing I have to build leadership capital to be able to do that. And the more we can do that just in rhythm, that the quick obedience that isn't just a left turn, but the ongoing obedience, I can't let my generation of leadership lose that just because it's not my natural nature to just be impulsive or spontaneous. And then it made me think like, am I going to raise children like my dad is, but their response to me, which was a response to my dad. So that got me back into that first, second, third generation.
Yeah. Full circle.
Yeah.
Well done.
My daughter,
season turn.
My daughter is as stubborn and hard-headed and strong-willed as my dad is and mom, like combined. And she's going to be a powerful leader, and it's probably not going to be systematic, and it's going to be very much like, this is what we're doing, and you're going to do it.
Right. That's awesome. Well, I think that about wraps up this conversation.
Yeah, this was a great one.
Yeah.
Love the insight.
Every once in a while, you go do something spontaneous and good things happen.
Yeah, every now and then you listen to the word of the Lord and you do it.
Every once in a while. All these other times, that's always my dad. Like, he's so witty, and I think because he's so witty, I've become very sarcastic. So he's like, I just obey the word. I was like, great. So all these plans are just me not listening to the word of the Lord. He's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm like, yeah, well, you kind of are.
Yeah, I love that. But okay, to add to that one last thing, because you had said you want to hold that. You want to make sure that that's a thing that doesn't go away. Doesn't mean you don't plan, you don't do anything, you just wait. I think it still means you plan, but you're able to make a shift. You're flexible.
In our conversations, as my dad and I have really dug deeper into these types of conversations, it really is a recognition that, like, he even said to me, which was a pretty cool moment. He's like, this is what I have valued in you that I haven't had in another leader. I didn't know why. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I needed you to be this way to balance me out. I wasn't trying to be overbalanced, but I just don't know how to be anybody other than me.
Right.
And so it is a matter of, like, I am who I am. Some of that's influenced by that, but some of it's just, these are my decisions that I've become who I am because of my relationship with Jesus as well. And so what I'm keeping is the ongoing listening ear to the Lord. And as much as that can craft in plans and rhythms and systems and processes and all that stuff that makes things healthier for the long run, I'm going to keep doing that, but also with that listening ear. If ever there is a left, like just a random thing that comes in that looks like a change of direction, if it's the word of the Lord, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Just because it's not a part of a plan that I felt like the Lord was leading in one season doesn't mean I then now push that aside and not do it or not consider that. And that's part of what eldership is for. And then it's also part of what Jubilee's for, is that recalibration. And I really have honored that. That's something we're not going to lose. Is not necessarily like a brand or a week. It's what that means to us.
Yeah.
Is that recalibration to the word of the Lord. And so it is a better together. I need spontaneous people in my life because I know my own faults is to get a little too rhythmic, too systematic. It's why I work the hardest on my prayer life, is because I do keep that listening ear to the Lord, and making sure that I don't get just stuck in a monotonous rhythm that when you talk about spiritual disciplines, you can talk about habits, all of those could easily become just monotony.
Yeah, for sure.
Better together.
Very good.
We're good.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, leave it a like. If you want to see more content like this, you can hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell to see when we release new videos. Share this with one of your friends or family members, and follow us on our Apple Podcast or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. That's very helpful too. And we'll see you in the next one.